To battle systemic racism, it will require bias training for police, law enforcement, the justice system, and us all.
But all the training in the world probably would not have prevented the death of George Floyd.
The American Religious Town Hall meeting is now in session.
Welcome, friends, to the American Religious Town Hall meeting, where the discussion of religious, political, and social issues is meant to promote the cause of religious freedom and to help us better understand each other. And now, here's your host and moderator, Pastor Jerry Lutz.
Welcome. I'm James Weingardner here for the American Religious Town Hall meeting. And you'll notice that I am not Pastor Lutz. He is your usual host, but because of the pandemic and the quarantine, several things have changed. Among them, we have spread out and had a few less panelists. But we're glad that you're here because we have an important subject to discuss today. And before we do that, we want to introduce you to our panelists. And we'll begin over here with Bishop OLSON.
How do you do? I'm Bishop Michael OLSON, and I am the Roman Catholic Bishop of the Diocese of Fort Worth, Texas.
My name is Rabbi Dan Levin. I'm the Senior Rabbi at Temple Bethel in Boca Raton, Florida.
I'm Tom Plumbley. I'm a minister in the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. I serve First Christian Church in Fort Worth, Texas.
Hi, I'm Tony Matthews, and I'm the senior pastor at North Garland Baptist Fellowship in Garland, Texas.
Our subject today has to do with George Floyd and unrest in America. It's safe to say that there was clear unanimity among Americans that the death of George Floyd was wrong and cruel. Everyone from President Trump to Nancy Pelosi has condemned the actions of the police officers. In a rare moment, Democrats and Republicans, blacks and whites, rich and poor, all spoke with one voice, expressing their outrage over the senseless killing of this African-American man. Immediately after the death of George Floyd, people began asking, is this an example of racism, poor training, or just a disregard for human life? In an article titled, The George Floyd Killing in Minneapolis Exposes the Failures of Police Reform, Mariah Stevens, who's a special education teacher, says, quote, they call for training, but are they doing the training? And is the training being internalized, unquote. Moreover, directly following Mr. Floyd's death, riots and looting started around the country, overshadowing the concerns of legitimate protesters. America is hurting and is literally on fire. Martin Luther King Jr. once said, we must learn to live together as brothers or perish together as fools. We will now turn our panelists to offer some perspective and counsel on this important topic. And here are the questions. 1, in your opinion, was the treatment of George Floyd, which led to his death, an example of poor training, or was it an example of something more sinister that exists within police departments? 2, how have you and members of your religious organization responded to this tragic killing of George Floyd? What has been the response to the riots from your religious organization? And 3, what counsel would you offer to Americans as we navigate through these dark waters of division, racial tension, and the hostility that exists between police officers and citizens? We'll begin with Rabbi Levin.
Well, first, I would say this is such an important topic, and I speak with a measure of trepidation and humility because I think that what this horrible incident has exposed is the systemic racism that we see in our society and how dangerous that is. In April of 2018, Dante Robinson and Rashawn Nelson, who were 23 years old at the time, went into a Starbucks in Center City, Philadelphia, to wait a business meeting with a friend. One of them decided he needed to use the restroom, and the store manager said, you're not allowed to use the restroom, you haven't ordered anything. So he went back to his seat. Within a matter of minutes of that one encounter with the store manager, 31-year-old Holly Hilton called the police and had the two men removed from the restaurant for trespassing, ultimately in handcuffs. And so when I think about that incident, I think about what happened in the life of that 31-year-old woman that led her to see two black men sitting in her restaurant as a threat. What happened to her in her childhood? What did she see on television? What did she hear on the radio? What conversations did she overhear in her classroom amongst her parents, her family, her friends, her own unique individual personal experiences that led her to objectify those two people? And ultimately, I think we all need to develop a much greater sensitivity to the inherent racism that we all carry around, even if we don't think of ourselves as racist. The fact is, I sit here with all of you, and I try very hard to look beyond the vessel that contains the Spirit and to look only at the Spirit, but I will tell you, I am sure I am a racist. And I need to learn how to mitigate that, as I'm sure is true for police departments, those in law enforcement, those in the justice system, and across our society need to learn how to understand our implicit biases. And so I believe that if police departments and all of those different strata that deal with those constituencies can have bias training, can learn to see their implicit racism, that they don't even know the biases they're walking around with, we may find ourselves in a far better place for all of our society.
Dr. Matthews?
It's good to be here, and this is as Rabbi Levin mentioned, a very important topic. It's a painful one to talk about, and even now, I still see the image of George Floyd on the ground with the knee in his neck. And of course, a lot of discussions came up surrounding the killing of Mr. Floyd. And one such question was this a lack of training? I don't think so. I think something more sinister was there. Having viewed the video several times, I'm not a lawyer and I'm not trying the case, but gosh, I mean, it's right there in plain sight. To have your knee on someone's neck, not for 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes, 6 minutes, 7 minutes, but over 8 minutes. That is something that's a heart issue. That is something that's on the inside that is not the norm. That's a boil on the backside of humanity that would do something like that. And I think it was sinister as well because the reports state that one of the other police officers said, and this is allegedly said, that he doesn't have a pulse, maybe we need to turn him over, and that the officer didn't do it. People were screaming in the crowd saying he can't breathe, and to just hear him saying, I can't breathe, and to call out for his mother, it's painful. It's painful. Now, having said all that, one of the things that, and I know each of us, we pay attention to details, one of the things that was really troubling to me is and I watched that clip intentionally several times, the officer had his hand in his pocket, just almost in a relaxed state. I don't understand it. So I don't know if training is needed. I think reform is needed within the police department. And let me say, I have police officers who are wonderful friends, great friends. And I don't believe every police officer is bad. So I want to be on record saying that. I think we need police departments. There's a lot of talk about defunding the police departments. I think that would be one of the most crucial mistakes, errors that we've ever made. And I think it would hurt African Americans and African American communities more than any community. So I think that conversation perhaps needs to be deleted. There are wonderful police officers, but when you get someone like this who can just murder someone, and it's just awful. So I don't think training would have helped that person. Training is needed, but I don't think it would have helped that individual. I'll have more to say later on, but we're praying for the Floyd family, and then of course we are recently we saw another shooting and killing of an African-American male just a few days ago. And the nation is talking about this, and I hope something good will come out of this.
It's just relentless. Reverend Plumbley?
Yeah, thank you. I think we white folk need to begin by shutting up and listening. Part of the problem has been that we've always responded to these issues by sharing our opinions, whatever they are, whichever side we're on, whether we're to the left or to the right or in the center or center right or center left or whatever we are, however we can label ourselves, whatever religious community we come out of. We have not done a good job of listening. And one of the things that I think we have an opportunity to do now is to listen more, because I think at least polls are showing that perhaps we have reached the tipping point where enough white folk finally get it that, number one, whites don't suffer from racism. There may be race bias that comes in our direction from time to time, but not racism, which is a structural matter, and it has to do with larger entities than just individuals. But I think that picture that Dr. Matthews recalled for all of us just a moment ago, of a man lying on the ground, helpless, handcuffed, with 3 officers with their feet or knees on him, 2 of which, both the one with his foot in his back and the one with his knee on his neck, cutting off both blood supply and airflow to the brain. That picture may have finally gotten through that there is something in our 400-year history that has taught young women in Starbucks, that has taught me to be more wary of people based on the pigmentation of their skin, more or less wary. And I think we just need to sit with that for a while and take that in and understand the depth of it, and then we can begin talking about training. Talking about recruiting. There's something about the recruitment for police departments that draws certain types of people. And again, there are some absolutely wonderful people in that profession, and they are great human beings and very professional about what they do and very much needed. There's some bad eggs too, just like there are in every profession.
Bishop Olson?
Thank you. I think the most jarring thing for people, certainly for me, is precisely what Tony said about I can't breathe. It was a clear cry for help and restraint, and was ignored by the officer, especially. And the thing is, training. I think sometimes we've reduced things to training, which becomes just external compliance. In other words, check that off, have we done this? I think we've moved away from education and formation, which always comes with it ongoing accountability, and being held accountable by a structured community. I think there are signs of hope, all right, for the very fact that so many of the people wearing uniforms who have been speaking before the cameras are people of color, men and women of color, which leads us to think that we've made progress in some ways, but in other ways we have not. And then this in itself is not a sufficient response. I think the issue of accountability to prevent the abuse of power, I think how we do ongoing formation, and also, frankly, the support for men and women in law enforcement, because they are putting their lives on the line, all right, in the midst of great turmoil. I mean, this is also in the midst of a pandemic, all right, where they've not been given a break but have had greater stress placed upon them, as have the members of an African American community, those particularly who live with higher density of population and stress. I think that these are issues that really we have to all take accountability for. I think one of the there's photos that to me that tells me that this is about race, but there's something more here, as the fact that there's a photo I saw of a young woman, white woman, I would guess her age to be her early 20s, and she is standing in close proximity of an African American officer who's wearing riot gear, and she has, two crude gestures, one with each hand, right in his face, protesting racism, and means it, all right. And so we do have to understand more about this, but mayhem and lawlessness, that is not the answer at all to this. In fact, it's going to lead us to greater regression. And as far as defunding the police, I think that is absolutely the wrong way to go. If we're going to do with the police department and with these communities what we need to do, we have to put better funding and smarter accountability, information, and education for everyone involved.
Dr. Matthews?
Yes, I'm always looking for solutions, and I love people of all stripes and colors and ethnicities, and I've spent the last 30-something years trying to bring us together. I was so happy that one of my great white friends, who was a prolific scholar, contacted me, and he said, "Tony, what can I tell my white brothers and sisters surrounding this conversation?" I said, you might want to communicate to our white brothers and sisters that when something like this happens, when there's an African-American man clearly murdered with George Floyd, it's not a good time to bring up black-on-black crime. That's not a good time to do that, because that cuts the conversation off. Black-on-black crime is a major problem. It is something that we have to deal with, but we're looking at a different topic. And so when we bring up black-on-black crime, when my white brothers and sisters do that, in the context of something like a police killing like we saw, it does nothing but make African Americans think that the problem's not there. Now, to my African American brothers and sisters, we have to teach our people to be respectful to police officers. When you're stopped, yes sir, no sir, yes ma'am, no ma'am, comply, and if there's a problem, get the badge number, because you don't want to become the topic of the television news. So there's a whole lot of different things that we can do. And the rioting is something that we just do not endorse. And what doesn't make sense is that you shouldn't loot or riot any place, but the very people that we saw, a lot of them were black-owned businesses. And so it's just a double hit on top of it. But I think our religious communities, this is time for us, it's a great time for us to come together and really, instead of bringing more sand to the beach, let's really look at some ways that we can move beyond a conversation to some transformation. And I think it's going to take some action. And I think it's prime time for it. I think we can do it.
Thank you, Dr. Matthews. We have a serious subject, and it's beautifully discussed by you gentlemen. We thank you for that. Right now, let's cut away to a message from our sponsor.
We hope you are enjoying today's program. If you would like to learn more about the American Religious Town Hall, please visit our website at americanreligious.org. That's americanreligious.org. There you can read about the mission and history of the program, learn about the Town Hall estates, and view past programs by clicking the appropriate menu buttons. Each week, Pastor Lutz looks forward to receiving your letters. You may write to him at the address shown on your screen. Send your letters to Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. That's Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. Thank you for writing, and thank you for watching.
Thank you for writing in. We invite you to write in and join the discussion. If you are interested in any of these topics, if any of these topics have moved you, all of these broadcasts are available online. Please share them and like them and pass them around among your friends. Let's summarize our positions on today's topic, and we're going to begin now with Bishop Olson.
The issue of training is only one aspect of a response to this. Training has to involve formation and education, internalization of the principles involved. When we witnessed the killing of George Floyd, we saw an abuse of power. We saw also an imbalance of power, and that was exacerbated by the differences in race as well. And so frequently, those things come together where law enforcement is involved, as well as in the responding to disturbances and crimes. There's a reflection of basic imbalances that we all have, or basic biases that we all have, that are always good to bring into the light, which is the best disinfectant. It is ultimately, it comes down to the effect of sin. All right, when we mistreat another human being, we're mistreating someone made in the image and likeness of God, and it's impossible to love God without loving our neighbor. And as we sin against our neighbor, we offend God.
Reverend Plumbley.
Thank you. There are a lot of ways that we can go in this conversation and have gone. One of the things that we didn't mention is that there is some evidence that there was a personal history between those two men, and we don't know how that's going to play out. I think we need to talk about something sinister that exists not just within police departments, but within this nation and within humanity that has been there for a very long time and cannot continue if we're going to make progress. I do think there are some things that can be done. Part of what we're seeing is deflection of the conversation. To get stuck on the words defunding the police. We're not talking about abolishing police departments, no longer paying them. We're talking about the possibility of moving some money that's been used on military equipment, military style equipment, into social services that would make neighborhoods better so that police officers don't have to work so hard in those neighborhoods. Moving some police functions, what have been police functions, into those who deal with mentally ill, like social workers. Those kinds of things that help us move from where we are to where we can be more healthy.
Dr. Matthews.
Yes. Again, a couple of solutions or things I would like to see implemented more broadly is when we talk about race and racism, I recommend to do it without becoming angry. So many times, as soon as you mention race or racism, the parties begin to fuss and fight, and then the conversation stops. The scripture says to be quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to anger in James 1, and that's so important. And then all races, all ethnic groups, we need to carefront people within our own communities who have racist tendencies. We need to talk with them as Paul did Cephas. And, he confronted him to his face, and he said, hey, man, this is not cool what you're doing, when he stood aloof when it came to the Gentiles. So, and lastly, I wish I had written this quote, but someone said, if God is not a part of the change, then we are just rearranging furniture in a burning house. So we have to bring God back into our country.
Rabbi Levin.
In the book of Deuteronomy, it says, justice, justice shall you pursue. It can't be something that you wait to happen, and hopefully we will heed that call at this time in our history. And we'll start, I think, for us to listen to the lived experiences of African American people, to help us to understand our own implicit biases that we walk around with. God gave us 2 eyes so that we could see with clarity, 2 ears that we might listen well, and 1 mouth that we hopefully can keep closed, and that we can use this time to learn and to grow, and God willing, to find pathways to create a more just society, one that's healed.
Thank you, panelists, and I think this has been a call to all of us to reflect on where we come from and where we are in our hearts towards one another. And that brings us to the religious liberty aspect of the United States of America. We have the opportunity here in this country to act any old way we want to. But sometimes when we do that, we act badly. And so we have a responsibility to one another to treat each other with kindness and careful consideration. And so the charter of the American Religious Town Hall provides that Roman Catholics, Protestants, Jews, educators, and others may appear on this program and can declare their beliefs without hesitancy. The rest of the members of the panel will uphold and guarantee that American right to all who appear, irrespective of their race or creed, so that the rest of the world can see that here in America, we believe in civil and religious freedom, not only in theory, but in reality. Now, friends, until next week, at the same time and over the very same channel, the American Religious Town Hall meeting stands adjourned. May the God of all of us bless all of you.